From the reinforced deck plating beneath observation sector echoed a sharp, metallic creak. A sound like that had no business existing inside a zero-G testing chamber. Specimen environments were supposed to be weightless, sterile, and silent. That auditory anomaly, trainee Virith noted with a twitch of his bioluminescent crest, meant the structural integrity of the floor was currently under localized stress. Down in the center of the containment ring stood the human Juno Voss. She rolled her shoulders back until the joints popped loudly, stretching her thick neck from side to side in a jerky, uncomfortable rhythm. Fidgeted the bipedal mammalian, as if the ambient atmospheric pressure itself was irritating her skin. Above her head, the primary environmental matrix display, designated EO12, pulsed with a soothing, pale blue illumination. The digital metric read exactly 3.9 meters per second squared. This number represented the optimal comfort threshold for a Korath military vessel, replicating the gentle, forgiving pull of Admiral Krex Van's homeworld. Through the temperature exchangers cycled air heated to 40 degrees Celsius, smelling faintly of ozone and recycled coolant. You'll want to hear exactly what happened when the gravity hit her standard. Trust me on that. The heavy blast doors hissed apart to admit the Admiral. Towering a full 2.1 meters, Krex Van moved with the predatory, segmented grace of his exoskeletal lineage. His chitinous breathing vents fluttered with a rhythmic, arrogant hiss as he evaluated the creature isolated in the ring below. "Coffee?" asked Juno, raising a dented thermal cylinder toward the glass she could not see through. The dark liquid sloshed inside the container, the thick, yellowish plaques of dead skin blistering her palms. The trainee analyzed with quiet horror. No biological entity developed such grotesque epidermal armor without enduring systemic physical trauma. Mapped across her knuckles, the heavy scarring suggested repeated blunt force impacts against hardened targets. Viritha's primary heart accelerated as he computed the sheer volume of kinetic violence necessary to forge a dermal layer that dense. Under a high-threat warrior caste, he immediately cataloged her, assuming her species subjected prisoners to gladiatorial torment to harden their shells. It was a terrifying miscalculation. "Your planetary data suggests an evolutionary impossibility, specimen," the Admiral transmitted through the localized audio feed. His voice resonated with the grinding scrape of tectonic plates. No bipedal vertebrate could construct a global civilization under the gravitational parameters your ambassadors claim. The structural requirements for basic mobility would shatter your own femurs. Juno took a slow, unbothered sip from her cylinder. She blew gently across the metallic rim, watching the steam curl and dissipate in the heavy, hot air, before licking a drop of brown liquid from her lower lip. "Want me to demonstrate?" she asked, her vocal cords vibrating at a frequency that translated through the military software as casual boredom. "It's easier than explaining." The Admiral's mandibles clicked in sharp, dismissive amusement. "You wish to expose your skeletal structure to lethal compression to prove a diplomatic lie?" Krex scoffed. "Proceed. Trainee, calibrate the matrix to match their fictional planetary baseline." Viritha's digits hovered over the haptic console. Swept over his luminescent skin a wave of cold dread as he inputted the first escalation sequence, watching the numbers on the EO12 display climb from 3.9 to 5.0, knowing that any reading past 6.0 was classified as a crushing atmospheric anomaly. Inside the chamber, the floor plating emitted a second, much louder groan. Juno stopped stretching her neck. She actually sighed, letting her arms drop comfortably to her sides as the pressure incrementally increased. To the trainee, the math unfolding before his eyes simply did not align with reality. At 5.0 meters per second squared, the human circulatory system should have begun showing signs of critical strain. Instead, her posture seemed to improve. The slouch vanished. Ceased entirely were the subtle tremors in her calf muscles. "Is the simulation active?" Krex demanded, his segmented head snapping toward the junior intelligence officer. "Affirmative, Admiral," Virith whispered, verifying the output vectors. Force application is uniformly distributed across the containment ring. We are currently at 50% of their claimed baseline. Increase the parameter to 7, ordered Krex. Let us see when the biological facade shatters. Through the thick glass, the hum of the artificial gravity generators deepened into an aggressive, bone-rattling thrum. The EO-12 display flashed amber, updating its digital output to 7.0. Above the containment zone, the heavy industrial lighting fixtures began to sway on their reinforced mounts, the metallic cables groaning under the sudden drag. Juno rolled her shoulders again, but this time, the movement was smooth, fluid. The fidgeting had completely vanished. She took another long drink from her cylinder. Getting a bit closer, the human transmitted, her voice completely devoid of the labored gasping that should have accompanied respiration in a heavy G environment. Air's still pretty thin, though. Viratha's primary heart skipped a vital beat. She was criticizing the atmospheric density while standing inside a kinetic pressure cooker. Through the thick observation glass, a new sound emerged from the testing chamber. Screaming metal. At 8.0 meters per second squared, the structural integrity fields of the Korath flagship began to actively fail. The reinforced deck plating beneath the human warped inward, forming a shallow, concave depression that stretched the titanium weave to its breaking point. Not a single automated alarm had been programmed for this specific environmental threshold, because no living specimen was ever expected to survive it. Matrix malfunction, hissed Admiral Krex Van, his mandibles snapping in agitated, rapid succession. The exoskeletal commander slammed a heavy, triple-jointed digit into the manual override console. Push the density parameters to 8.5. The mammalian is utilizing some form of internal mass dampener to trick the biosensors. Only data could explain the impossible. Across his secondary terminal, trainee Virath frantically scrolled through the terrestrial archives, bypassing the physiological summaries and diving directly into the specimen's socio-economic file. Those heavily calloused hands, the trainee desperately reasoned, must belong to their apex military caste. A genetically modified supersoldier bred specifically for high-gravity combat drops on hostile worlds. Inside the pressurized ring, Juno Voss shifted her weight lazily. She tilted the dented thermal cylinder, peering down into the dark bottom. With a slow, entirely unbothered motion, she swirled the last few drops of cold coffee, tapped the metallic rim twice against her thumbnail, and swallowed the dregs. Maximum atmospheric compression, Krex ordered, his voice echoing off the sterile walls of the observation deck. Execute the planetary baseline. Struck the sealed testing chamber an invisible, localized meteor of gravitational impact. The digital display on EO-12 surged past the 9-point threshold, locking violently at 9.81 meters per second squared. Shattered instantly were the heavy industrial lighting mounts above the containment zone. Sparks cascaded through the dense, heavy air like burning rain. The ambient hum of the gravity generators became a tortured, deafening roar as the flagship's core reactors drained massive amounts of power just to maintain the localized gravity well. The air inside the chamber turned hazy, visibly distorting under the sheer pressure of the artificial mass. Juno Voss did not flinch. She simply stood perfectly still in the center. The rigid, unnatural posture she had exhibited at the 3.9 baseline was completely gone. Her spine aligned naturally. Her breathing slowed to a deep, even rhythm. The crushing weight of her native world, she accepted without a single physiological complaint. The environmental pressure was actively destroying a military-grade containment module, yet the biological specimen inside looked completely at peace. "Yeah, that's it," the human transmitted over the chaotic static of the failing audio feed, her vocal cords vibrating with absolute clarity through the dense atmosphere. "This is normal for us. We work in this all day," came the sharp, wet gasp of the commander from the edge of the control console. Admiral Krex Van was gripping the titanium desk with both sets of upper appendages. The ambient, localized overspill of the gravity matrix was bleeding through the observation glass, increasing the room's pressure by mere fractions of a percent. It was enough. The rhythmic, arrogant hiss of his chitinous breathing vents suddenly stopped. They violently snapped shut. From the commander's throat emitted a high-pitched, wet wheeze of pure, suffocating terror. The apex predator of the Korath fleet was physically unable to draw breath in the mere shadow of human gravity. On the terminal screen, the terrestrial file finished translating, pulling data from the deep cultural archives. Virith stared at the occupational designation blinking in harsh green text. Job title: JT-32, Roofer. The translation matrix provided the contextual definition without hesitation. A civilian laborer. An entity responsible for manually applying weather-resistant materials to the tops of basic residential shelters. Not a warlord. Not an elite gladiator. Just an ordinary worker. The thick, yellowish plaques of dead skin on her palms were not the result of brutal melee combat or systematic torture. They were standard work blisters from hauling raw materials and holding a simple hand tool. The sheer physical durability required for humanity's most mundane daily labor vastly exceeded the absolute limits of Korath elite combat. Juno Voss kicked a piece of shattered lighting fixture out of her way. The heavy chunk of metal skidded across the buckled floor, moving sluggishly under the extreme gravitational drag. She looked up toward the one-way viewing port, holding her empty thermal cylinder loosely by the handle. "Want to see how we hammer nails?" she asked. Trainee Virith slowly backed away from the primary control console. Through the viewing port, the human stood completely unbothered amid the sparking debris. The fractured deck plating groaned under her heavy boots. Above her head, the primary environmental matrix display pulsed with a harsh crimson glare. The digital metric locked at 9.81 meters per second squared flashed beside a new automated designation. Class 12 Hazard.